The air tasted of ash and melted metal as Commander Park. Gina stepped through what had once been the heart of New Geneva. Her military boots made soft crunching sounds on the strange, glass-like surface that covered the ground. 3 days ago, this had been smooth stone pavement where children played and families walked. Now it was something else entirely, transformed by the terrible heat of alien weapons, into a substance that looked like frozen tears. Smoke still rose from the ruins around her. Twisted pieces of buildings reached toward the gray sky like broken fingers. The Vorthan Empire had turned humanity's most beautiful city into a graveyard, and the smell of death hung heavy in the recycled air of her breathing mask. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Kim Wan called out as he approached through the rubble. His young face was pale behind his helmet's visor, and his voice sounded empty, like someone who had seen too much. "I have the final numbers." Gina turned to face him, though part of her wanted to keep walking, to pretend she hadn't heard. She already knew the numbers would be terrible, but she had to hear them. It was her duty to the dead. 8 million people. Confirmed dead, Kim said, his words coming out in short, clipped sentences. 2 million, still missing. The search teams think most of the missing are, well, there's nothing left to find. The weight of those numbers hit Gina like a physical blow. 10 million people. An entire city full of mothers and fathers, children and grandparents, artists and teachers and shopkeepers. All gone in a matter of hours, because the Vorthans had wanted to make a point around them. Rescue teams in thick radiation suits moved through the wreckage like ghosts. They pulled survivors from collapsed underground shelters, their movements careful and desperate. Each person they found alive was a small miracle, but there were so few miracles left. The Vorthans sent the same message to every human world, Kim continued. Submit to our rule, or watch your cities burn. They're giving us 72 hours to surrender. Gina looked up at the sky, where alien ships still moved like dark stars. The Vorthans had made their message clear. They had the power to destroy any human city they chose, and they would use it without hesitation. "What about the other colonies?" she asked, though she already feared the answer. Kim's voice cracked as he spoke. 12 worlds hit at the same time. Busan Station, New Seoul, Terra Nova, ... All of them are gone. The Vorthans hit every major human settlement simultaneously. They wanted to break our spirit in one coordinated strike. Gina closed her eyes and felt the weight of each destroyed world. Busan Station had been humanity's gateway to the Outer Rim. New Seoul was where her own sister had lived with her children. Terra Nova was home to the best universities in human space. All gone. All turned to ash and glass like the city around her. A transport ship roared overhead, its engines casting shadows on the ruined ground. It was one of the last evacuation vessels, carrying survivors to safety in the outer colonies. The Vorthans had expected humanity to break after seeing their cities burn. They expected people to beg for mercy, to surrender rather than face more destruction. But they didn't understand humans very well. "Signal the fleet," Gina said quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "Full withdrawal to the outer colonies. We're not going to give them any more targets." Kim nodded, but she could see the confusion in his eyes. It looked like they were running away, admitting defeat. "And get me Dr. Lee Hun," she added. "Tell him it's time to dust off his theoretical work. Tell him we need to discuss stars." The young lieutenant looked puzzled, but he saluted and moved away to carry out her orders. Gina watched him go, then turned back to look at the dead city one last time. She had read Dr. Lee's papers years ago, back when she was still studying at the military academy. His theories about stellar manipulation had seemed like science fiction. Then, the kind of wild ideas that academics discussed in journals that no one else bothered to read. But now, standing in the ruins of New Geneva, those theories seemed like something else entirely. The final transport ship lifted off, carrying the last survivors to safety. Its engines glowed bright against the gray sky, as it climbed toward the stars. Soon, the dead city would be truly empty, left to the silence and the ghosts. Gina made a promise then, speaking the words aloud to the empty air. "You started this war by burning our cities," she said, her voice carrying across the wasteland. "You wanted to show us your power by destroying everything we built." She looked up at the alien ships above, their dark shapes moving against the stars. "But we're going to end this war by doing something you never imagined," she continued. "We're going to turn your suns cold. We're going to take away your light and warmth, just like you took away our cities. And when your worlds freeze in the dark, you'll understand what it means to lose everything." The words hung in the air like smoke, carrying a promise that would echo across the galaxy. The hidden research facility looked like any other asteroid mining station from the outside, but inside, it buzzed with the desperate energy of people, working to save their species. Dr. Li Haiyan stood in the main conference room, surrounded by holographic displays that showed star charts and complex mathematical equations. 6 months of non-stop work had aged him 10 years. His black hair was now streaked with silver, and his hands shook slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. "The basic idea is actually quite simple," he said to the group of military officers and scientists gathered around the table. "Every star is like a giant furnace. It burns by crushing hydrogen atoms together to make helium. This process creates all the heat and light that keeps planets warm." Admiral Park Gina leaned forward in her chair. She looked different too, after the months of war. Her face was thinner, her eyes harder. "And you can stop this process. We can interrupt it." Haiyan nodded, touching a control to make the holographic display show a cutaway view of a star's interior. "By sending special energy waves into the star's core, we can disrupt the fusion reaction. Think of it like throwing water on a fire. The star will begin to cool and dim within hours." General Choi Minho, a stocky man with gray hair and suspicious eyes, crossed his arms. "How long would it take to build this weapon?" "That's the good news," Haiyan said, though his smile was tired. "We've been working on the prototype for months, day and night shifts, using materials we salvaged from the destroyed research stations. It's ready for testing." Dr. Yoon Ara, the representative from the surviving colonies, spoke up. "How big is this device?" "About the size of a small space station. We can transport it on a heavy cruiser." Yoon paused, looking at each face around the table. "But you need to understand what we're talking about here. This isn't just destroying a planet or a city. We're talking about killing an entire star system." The room went quiet. Through the facility's windows, they could see the distant sun that warmed Earth and its colonies. It was hard to imagine that such a thing could be turned off like a light switch. General Choi shook his head slowly. "We're talking about becoming star killers. That's crossing a line we can never come back from. Once we do this, we become something different, something terrible." "They already made us into something terrible," Dr. Yoon said, her voice sharp with anger. "The Vorthons burned our cities. They killed billions of innocent people. While we sit here debating right and wrong, they're preparing to finish what they started." She stood up and activated her own display, showing intelligence reports from across human space. "Look at these fleet movements. The Vorthons are gathering their forces for one final attack. They want to wipe out every remaining human colony." The display showed red dots representing enemy ships moving toward the last human strongholds. There were so many of them, like a swarm of angry insects closing in on their prey. "Our intelligence suggests we have maybe 2 weeks before they strike," Haiyan added quietly. "After that, there won't be enough humans left to operate this weapon." Admiral Gina stared at the tactical display, her mind racing. She thought about New Geneva, about the 10 million people who had died there. She thought about her sister and her children on New Sol, and how their final messages had been cut off mid-sentence when the Vorthon plasma weapon struck. "If we do this," she said slowly, We target their outer systems first. Give them a warning they can't ignore. Show them what we're capable of before we... Before we go after their home worlds. A demonstration, General Choi said. Understanding. Kill a star to save a war. It's still murder on a massive scale, Dr. Yoon pointed out. Even their outer systems have colonies, families, children. The room fell silent again. Each person was thinking about the weight of the decision they were about to make. They were planning to become the kind of monsters that parents told their children about in scary stories. The Vorthans gave us a choice, Gina said finally. Submit or watch our cities burn. They made their decision when they chose to burn our cities anyway. Now we're making ours. She looked around the table at each person. We're going to show them what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. We're going to take away their light. Heian nodded, though his face was pale. I'll begin final preparations for the test. We'll need to choose a target system carefully, somewhere with minimal civilian population. And then, General Choi asked, then we send the Vorthans a message. They'll never forget, Gina replied. We tell them that if they want to play with fire, they should remember that humans learned how to control the stars themselves. As the meeting broke up, each person carrying the weight of what they were about to do, Yoon wondered if they were saving humanity or destroying what it meant to be human. But with only 2 weeks left, there was no time for doubt. The storm was gathering, and soon it would be time to turn out the lights. The star had been burning for 6 billion years, longer than Earth had existed. It was an old red dwarf, smaller and cooler than most stars, but it had faithfully provided light and warmth to its 3 planets for eons. The Vorthans had built a research station on the 3rd planet, studying the ancient stars, slow but steady. Dr. Lee Hein watched from the bridge of the human ship as his device floated silently toward the star. The stellar manipulation device looked harmless enough, about the size of a small space station, its metal surface gleaming in the red starlight. But inside that innocent-looking shell was technology that could do the impossible. Device is in position, reported Commander Sung-dae, his voice steady but tight. Beginning quantum field manipulation in 3, 2, 1, The change was not visible at first. Stars don't die quickly under normal circumstances. They burn for millions or billions of years, slowly consuming their fuel until they finally flicker out. But this was not normal. The device began sending invisible waves of energy into the star's core, disrupting the nuclear fusion that had kept it alive for so long. Stellar core temperature dropping, called out the science officer, her voice filled with amazement and horror. The fusion reaction is shutting down faster than our models predicted. Through the ship's main viewer, they could see the star beginning to change. Its red glow was becoming dimmer, like a campfire slowly dying. The light that had warmed 3 planets for billions of years was fading away. How long do we have? Heian asked, though he already knew the answer from his calculations. Complete stellar shutdown in approximately 2 hours, Song-dae replied. The planets will begin freezing within the hour. On the tactical display, they could see the 3 planets that orbited the dying star. 2 were barren rocks, but the 3rd showed signs of life. Not natural life, but the artificial lights and heat signatures of a Vorthan research station. Sir, the communications officer suddenly announced, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthan outpost on the 3rd planet. They're asking for help. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Vorthan scientist in what looked like an emergency shelter. The alien's normally blue skin had turned pale, and its large eyes were wide with fear. Behind it, Heian could see other Vorthans huddled together, including what appeared to be families with young ones. Human vessels, the alien said in broken, but understandable English. Our station is losing power. The star is dying. We do not understand what is happening. Please, we have civilians here. Children, can you assist with evacuation? Heian stared at the screen, feeling the weight of what he had done. 200 Vorthans were trapped on a world that was rapidly freezing to death. In a few hours, their planet would be colder than the deepest winter on Earth. Their heating systems would fail, their atmosphere would begin to freeze, and everyone on the surface would die. Temperature on the planet's surface is already dropping below freezing, reported the science officer. Their power grid is failing as their solar collectors lose efficiency. Commander Songde looked at Han with troubled eyes. Do we respond to their request? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Vorthans had shown no mercy when they burned human cities. They had killed 10 million people in New Geneva alone, and they had done it without warning, without giving civilians a chance to escape. They had targeted schools and hospitals, along with military installations. But this was different. This was not a battle between soldiers. This was not even the quick death of a plasma bombardment. This was watching an entire world slowly freeze to death, knowing that every person on it would suffer for hours before they died. Sir, the communications officer said quietly, they're sending us a list of their personnel, scientists, technicians, support staff, and ... 37 children. Heon closed his eyes, thinking about the choice before him. He could let them die, and it would be justice for what they had done to humanity. Or he could save them, and prove that humans were better than their enemies. Prepare the rescue ships, he said finally. We'll extract them, sir. Songde looked surprised. We're not like them, Hyun said firmly. We don't kill children, even alien children. But first, we send a message to the Vorthan High Command. He activated the ship's long-range communications system and began recording. To the Vorthan High Command. You have witnessed the death of a star. In 3 hours, this system will be dark and cold. We have done this with a single device, and we can do it to any star in your empire. He paused, looking at the screen showing the dying star. You burned our cities and killed our people. You thought we would surrender. Instead, we have learned to kill stars. If you continue this war, your home system will be next. We will turn your suns cold, and your worlds will freeze in the dark. The message was sent across the galaxy at faster than light speed. Soon, the Vorthan leadership would know that humanity had crossed a line that no species had ever crossed before. As the rescue ships moved toward the freezing planet, Heon wondered if they had just saved the galaxy or doomed it forever. The 3 human ships moved through space like shadows, their hulls black against the starfield. They had been traveling for weeks to reach this place, using stolen Vorthan cloaking technology to hide from enemy patrols. Now they floated at the edge of the most important star system in the Vorthan Empire. Captain Bae Su stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the twin blue giants that dominated the system. The 2 massive stars burned with incredible brightness, much hotter and larger than Earth's sun. Their brilliant blue light bathed everything in the system with an intense glow that made the planets below look like jewels. Cloaking field is working perfectly, reported his navigation officer. The Vorthon sensors can't see us. We're invisible to them. Bae Su nodded, but his stomach felt tight with nervousness. They were about to do something that had never been done before in the history of the galaxy. They were going to kill 2 stars at the same time. In the science bay below, Dr. Lee Hyun worked on the final preparations for the stellar manipulation devices. His hands moved with practiced skill as he checked each system, but inside he felt cold and empty. He had become very good at killing stars, and that frightened him more than any enemy weapon. The 2 devices sat in their launch tubes, each one the size of a small building. They looked innocent enough, just metal boxes filled with complex machinery, but each one contained enough power to end a star's life. Together, they would turn the Vorthon home system into a frozen wasteland. Dr. Haon came Admiral Park, Gina's voice over the ship's communication system. She was commanding the operation from a safe distance, but her voice sounded tired and sad. You have permission to begin the operation. Hyun looked through the small porthole at the beautiful blue stars. Somewhere around those stars was Vorthan Prime, the Empire's homeworld. It was a gorgeous planet, green and blue like Earth, with vast oceans and continents covered in alien cities. Billions of Vorthans lived there, working in their jobs, raising their families, dreaming about the future. In a few hours, all of them would be dead. "Are the devices ready?" Besu asked over the intercom. "Ready for deployment," Heian replied, his voice steady despite the terrible weight of what he was about to do. "Then let's finish this war." The launch tubes opened silently in the vacuum of space. The two stellar manipulation devices drifted out of the ships like seeds on the wind, their thruster systems guiding them toward their targets. They were small compared to the massive stars. But size didn't matter when you knew exactly where to strike. Through the bridge windows, they could see Vorthan Prime in the distance. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful, its surface covered in lights that twinkled like stars. Cities full of millions of people, all living their lives under the warm glow of their twin suns. "How long until the devices reach the stars?" Besu asked. 30 minutes to reach optimal position," Heian replied. "Then another hour for the quantum field generators to build up enough power." The devices moved steadily toward the two blue giants, their progress tracked on the ship's sensors. As they got closer to the stars, their instruments began to measure the incredible heat and radiation coming from the stellar core. These were young, powerful stars, much more energetic than the old red dwarf they had killed in the test. "Sir," the communications officer suddenly called out, his voice urgent. "The Vorthan defense fleet is moving. They're mobilizing their ships." On the tactical display, red dots began appearing as Vorthan warships powered up their engines and started moving toward the human ships. But they were too far away, and the human ships were still invisible to their sensors. "They can't see us," Besu said, confused. "How do they know we're here?" "They're detecting the quantum signatures from the devices," Heian explained. "The field generators are creating energy patterns that their sensors can pick up. They know something is wrong with their stars." The Vorthan fleet was moving fast, but not fast enough. Hundreds of enemy ships were racing toward the stars, their weapons charging, their crews probably screaming orders and preparing for battle. But they were like ants trying to stop an earthquake. "Devices are in position," Heian announced. Beginning stellar manipulation. The devices activated simultaneously, sending invisible waves of exotic energy into the cores of both stars. The process was silent and invisible, but its effects were immediate. Deep inside the stars, the nuclear fusion that had burned for millions of years began to falter and fail. "Sir," the sensor officer called out in amazement, "the stars are responding. Core temperatures are dropping in both stars." Through the bridge windows, they could see the twin suns beginning to change. Their brilliant blue light was becoming dimmer, shifting toward red as the stars began to cool. It was like watching two giant campfires slowly dying. On Vorthan Prime, the eternal daylight that had warmed the planet for millions of years began to fade. The bright blue sky grew darker, and the temperature started to drop. Soon, the people on the surface would notice that their world was growing cold. "It's done," Heian said quietly. "The stars are dying." The war was about to end, but the victory would taste like ashes in their mouths. The message came exactly 72 hours after the stars began to die. Admiral Park Gina received it in her command ship, orbiting at a safe distance from the Vorthan home system. The transmission was short and desperate. "We surrender. Please, we need to talk." Now she stood in what had once been the grandest conference room in the Vorthan Empire. The walls were made of crystal that had always glowed, with the light of the twin suns, creating beautiful patterns of blue and white across the ceiling. But now the crystal was dark and cold, and the only light came from emergency heating units that hummed desperately in the corners. Her breath came out in small white puffs as she spoke. Even with the heating systems running at full power, the room was freezing. Outside the tall windows, the sky that had once blazed with brilliant blue light was now a dim gray, like twilight that would never end. High Counselor Vorth Kellen sat across from her at the negotiation table. He had once been the most powerful being in the Vorthan Empire, commanding fleets that controlled hundreds of star systems. Now he was wrapped in a thick thermal suit, his proud blue skin pale with cold, his large eyes desperate and frightened. The terms are very simple, Gina said, her voice echoing in the cold chamber. You will withdraw completely from all human territories. You will pay reparations for the worlds you destroyed, and you will guarantee that this war ends now and forever. The alien leader's translator device crackled with static as he spoke. You have become what you fought against, Admiral. You are destroyers of worlds. You have killed billions of innocent people. Gina looked out through the viewport at the darkened sky. The twin stars were still there, but they were dying. Their light was so dim now that it barely provided any warmth to the planet below. She could see the surface of Vorthan Prime through the thin atmosphere, and it was already covered with ice and snow. Yes, she said quietly. We have become destroyers of worlds. Dr. Li-Hyun stood beside her, holding a tablet computer that showed the current status of the dying stars. His face was pale and tired, and his hands shook slightly as he operated the device. The stellar restoration process will take approximately 50 years, he said. We can begin the work immediately, but some of the damage may be permanent. The High Counselor leaned forward, his breathing creating small clouds of vapor. 50 years. Billions of our people will die before then. Our planet is already freezing. Our cities are losing power. Our children are dying in the cold. Your people killed 10 million humans in New Geneva alone, Gina replied. You burned our cities without warning. You targeted schools and hospitals. You showed no mercy to our children. That was war, the alien said desperately. This is ... This is something else. This is the murder of an entire star system. Gina signed the peace treaty with a pen that felt heavy in her hand. Each letter of her signature was a promise that the killing would stop, but also an admission of what humanity had become. They had started the war as defenders of their worlds and their people. They were ending it as the beings who had learned to kill stars. The war is over, she said as she finished signing. Your fleets will withdraw, your people will go home, and we will begin the process of trying to bring your stars back to life. Dr. Haon activated his tablet and began the complex process of sending new commands to the stellar manipulation devices. It will take time, he said. We need to reverse the quantum field disruption gradually. If we try to restart the fusion process too quickly, the stars might explode instead of returning to normal. Through the windows, they could see transport ships moving through the dim sky, carrying refugees away from the freezing planet. The Empire's mighty fleets were now being used to evacuate civilians from their own home world. How many will die while we wait? The High Counselor asked. Fewer than would have died if the war had continued, Gina replied. But still, too many. As the meeting ended and the alien leaders left the conference room, Gina remained at the window, looking out at the darkened sky. The twin stars were barely visible now, two faint points of light in the eternal twilight. She thought about the billions of Vorthans who were huddling in their cities, burning furniture and books to stay warm, watching their world slowly freeze around them. She thought about the human cities that had been burned to ash, about the children who had died in the plasma bombardments, about her sister's family on Nusol who had been silenced forever. The Vorthans had started this war by showing no mercy. Humanity had ended it by becoming something that the galaxy had never seen before. The war was over. The burning had stopped, but the cold they had brought to the galaxy would linger for generations, a reminder of what happened when civilizations pushed each other too far. Humanity had won, But in winning, they had lost something important about what it meant to be human. They had become the monsters that parents would tell their children about in stories, the beings who could reach out across space and turn off the stars themselves. The peace was cold, and it would stay cold for a very long time.